The alarm on my wrist buzzed twice, which meant someone was standing outside my door before I even opened my eyes. I sat up fast, heart already pounding, because on this station, nobody knocked twice unless something was wrong. I opened the door and found her there, the small alien girl named Vey, barefoot on the cold metal floor, hiding behind my leg before I could even say good morning. Her skin had that pale blue shimmer under the hallway lights, and her 3 fingers were gripping my trouser leg so tight I could feel her shaking. Behind her, the corridor was empty. No mother, no guard, just silence, and that kind of silence that makes the hair on your neck stand up. I crouched down and asked her what happened, keeping my voice low and steady the way you talk to any frightened child, human or not. She did not answer with words. She just pointed down the hallway, toward the docking bay, where a low horn had started to sound, the kind of horn this station only used for one reason: evacuation. I had known Vey for almost 3 months by then. Her mother, Mira, worked in the water reclamation unit 2 levels below my quarters, and their people, the Solinari, had arrived on this station as refugees after their home system was struck by something none of them liked to talk about. They kept to themselves. Their culture taught caution around humans, an old fear passed down from a war that ended before I was even born, a war humans did not start but never fully explained either. Vey had broken that fear the very first week, wandering into the common garden while I was fixing an irrigation pipe, watching me with her huge violet eyes until I finally looked up and smiled at her. She smiled back before her instincts could stop her. Children are like that. They see people before they see stories about people. Since then, we had our little routine. Every evening after her mother finished her shift, Vey would sneak up to my corridor, and we would play a hand-clapping game I taught her, one my own grandmother taught me when I was young. She could not pronounce half the words, but she never once got the rhythm wrong. Now she was standing in my doorway at the wrong hour, shaking, with the evacuation horn rising behind her. I picked her up without thinking twice and moved toward the stairwell, because the lifts always locked during an emergency. She wrapped both arms around my neck and pressed her face into my shoulder, and I could feel her trembling with every step I took. 2 levels down, the corridor was full of noise. Solinari families were rushing toward the docking bay, elders being helped along by younger hands, children crying, alarms flashing red across every wall panel. I pushed through the crowd, calling out for Mira, hoping she would hear her daughter's name over the chaos. It was Vey who found her first. She lifted her head and let out a sharp call, a sound I had never heard her make before, somewhere between a word and a whistle. Mira turned so fast, she nearly fell over another woman beside her. The relief on her face lasted only a second before it turned into something else, something sharper. She reached for Vey immediately, speaking fast in her own language, and I understood enough by then to know she was asking why her daughter was in a human's arms, instead of hidden safely in their own quarters. I set Vey down gently, expecting her to run straight to her mother the way any frightened child would. Instead, she grabbed my hand and held on. Mira called her again, her voice sharper this time, the kind of voice a parent uses when there is no time left to argue. The horn overhead grew louder, and somewhere down the corridor I heard metal groaning, the sound of something in the station structure taking strain it was never built to handle. Vey still did not let go of my hand. I told her gently that she needed to go with her mother now, that it was not safe here, but she looked up at me and shook her head, her small fingers tightening around mine. She said one word, the first full human word I had ever heard her use clearly. She said, "Stay." Mira's face changed completely. The fear for her daughter's safety was still there, but now there was something else layered over it, something almost like shame. She crouched down to Vey's level, right there in the middle of the panicked crowd, and asked her daughter why, in their own tongue, though I understood the shape of the question well enough. Vey answered in halting Solinari, mixed with the few English words she had learned from me. She said that when the ceiling had cracked in their quarters minutes earlier, when the lights had gone out and her mother was trapped helping an injured neighbor, it was not one of her own people who came looking for her in the dark. It was the human 2 floors up, the one who taught her the clapping game, the one who never once made her feel like a stranger. I had not even realized that was what happened. I had simply heard the horn, grabbed my emergency light, and gone looking the moment I found her outside my door. I did not think of it as brave. I thought of it as the only thing to do. Mira looked up at me then, and for the first time in 3 months, she did not look at me like someone who belonged to a species her people had been taught to fear. She looked at me like a person. The corridor lights flickered and the groaning sound above us grew worse. A station officer pushed past, shouting for everyone to move faster, that the damaged section could vent atmosphere within minutes. There was no more time for conversations, only for moving. I picked Vey up again, since her small legs could not match the pace of the crowd, and Mira fell in step right beside me, instead of pulling her daughter away. We moved together through the narrow corridor, past sparking panels and Solinari families huddled close, until we reached the wider gallery that led to the escape pods. An engineer I recognized, a woman named Priya from the maintenance crew, was directing people into pods as fast as she could, counting bodies, slamming hatches the second each one filled. The line ahead of us was long, and the groaning sound above had turned into something worse, a deep shudder that ran through the entire deck. Mira grabbed my arm and asked, in careful broken English, if there was a faster way. I told her about the secondary pod bay near the old cargo section, one most people forgot existed, because it had been sealed for repairs months ago. I had helped fix the seal myself 2 weeks earlier. It should still be functional. We broke away from the main line and ran, Vey bouncing against my chest with every step, her small hand fisted in the collar of my shirt. Mira kept pace beside us, faster than I expected, glancing back every few seconds to make sure her daughter was still there, still safe, still with us. The cargo section was dim and mostly empty, but the secondary pod bay was exactly where I remembered it, its hatch light glowing a steady green. I keyed in the override code from memory, praying the repairs had held, and the hatch hissed open on the first try. Inside, the pod was small, built for maybe 6 people, but there was room enough. Mira climbed in first, then turned around and reached for her daughter. This time, Vey went to her without hesitation, wrapping her arms around her mother's neck, the way she had wrapped them around mine minutes earlier. I stepped back to seal the hatch from outside, since someone needed to make sure the launch sequence triggered properly, and there was no time to explain the manual override to someone unfamiliar with human tech. Mira's eyes went wide with alarm again, this time for me. She said my name, the first time I had ever heard her say it, and asked what about me. I told her the main line was still moving, that I would find another pod, that she needed to trigger the launch the moment the hatch sealed, because the deck would not hold much longer. Vey reached out through the closing gap, her small hand stretching toward mine one last time. I caught her fingers for a single second, gave them a gentle squeeze, and let go. The hatch sealed. Through the small viewport I watched Mira pull her daughter close, both of them looking back at me until the pod's launch sequence lit up, and the whole thing dropped away toward open space with a hiss of released pressure. I ran back toward the main gallery, and the deck beneath me finally gave way to the pressure it had been fighting for the last 10 minutes, buckling behind me instead of under me, which was the only reason I made it to the last human pod still boarding. Priya grabbed my arm and hauled me inside, before slamming the hatch shut herself. We launched seconds before the damaged section vented completely into space. The station survived, barely, with enough structure intact for repair crews to stabilize it within the week. Everyone from our section made it out. Every single pod reached the rescue ships waiting nearby. I found Mira and Vey 3 days later in the temporary shelter set up on the rescue vessel, sitting near a viewport that looked out over the slowly repairing station. Vey saw me first and ran the length of the room, nearly knocking me over with how hard she wrapped her arms around my legs. Mira walked over more slowly, but when she reached me, she did something I had not expected. She placed her hand flat against her own chest, then reached out and placed it gently against mine, a gesture I later learned was reserved among her people for family, not strangers, not even close friends. Family. She told me, in English far steadier than before, that her daughter had seen something in me long before she herself was ready to see it, and that she was grateful her daughter's heart had been braver than her own fear. Vey tugged at my sleeve and asked, in her small mixed language, if we could still play the clapping game. I knelt down right there in the middle of the shelter deck and started the rhythm, and she followed every beat perfectly, laughing the whole way through, as if nothing in the universe had ever frightened her at all. And maybe, for her, nothing ever would again.